Welcome one and welcome all to the greatest show of them all. It is the NFC East Mixtape Volume 141. You can listen to this show wherever you get your NFC East blog podcasts across the SB Nation universe. You can also watch this show on the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel or the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. If you do any of these things, you will see, hear, or see. I already said see. The faces and voices of myself. I'm RJ Ochoa from Blogging the Boys. It's Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation. It is Thursday, December 7th, 2023. We have kicked off with Thursday Night Football. A lovely affair, to say the least. And for the first time ever, we tried to do this and it worked. We are live in multiple destinations. This is a live edition of the NFC East Mixtape for anybody who hasn't been here before. We record this as a podcast every week that comes out on Wednesday. But right now, you can watch it on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel, Blogging the Boys Facebook page, or Blogging the Boys Twitch channels, as well. Brandon Lee Gowton as the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel. What up to the BGN audience?
Exciting development. It's well overdue. Shout out, speaking of BGN, to BGN Radio sponsor, one of many, Wrong Crowd Beer Company from Westchester. I'm enjoying do you see that, RJ? A strawberry milkshake IPA. It's actually pretty good. So I have that going here. I'm excited to talk to you.
That sounds horrible.
It's not horrible.
I mean, when I think IPA, I think like a really dark beer. I don't think of dark when I think of strawberry.
Our sponsor is horrible. That's a terrible thing to say. Don't say that. It's not. And shout out to both audiences. Thank you to everyone for tuning in tonight.
Agreed. On the subject, I guess, of your sponsor. This is your sponsor, not our sponsor. This is a BGN exclusive sponsor here, to be very clear here. Our great friend Tim, the whiskey. Actually, I was told by Mario Cap on the reviews that there's a Chester, because I asked if there was an East Chester. So there's a Chester and a West Chester. But Tim, the whiskey influencer, says, why aren't you guys enjoying some nice whiskeys while live streaming this game?
Well, we're due. I don't have any.
That's true. Tim is the whiskey man in a lot of senses, but also in a literal sense. We have a lot of comments to get to. So wherever you're watching, however you're watching, if you offer a comment, if you have a question, we'll, of course, get to it. We're here because the Dallas Cowboys host the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday Night Football. I don't know when we started doing these live mixtapes, Brandon. I know it was last year. I don't know if we did it for both games or just the Christmas Eve game, but this is now kind of our tradition, obviously, baked into the overall culture of the mixtape.
It's a good time, a fun time. Like to do it a little bit different. I feel like, especially for the second live episode, because I think there's less to talk about the matchup. It's like Eagles and Cowboys just played a few weeks ago. Like it's not like we're reinventing the whole matchup. Like we know what these teams are, who these teams are for the most part. Obviously, we'll talk about some of that stuff, but we really need the questions from the listeners as well as a jumping off point. So we appreciate those.
Let's kind of roll through kind of rapid fire style some of these comments. Some are comments, some are questions. The ever fraudulent Holden asked us to rank our top gas station snacks, maybe top 3. I'll go Reese's peanut butter cups, any bag of chips, and beaver nuggets from Buc-ee's. Which, I mean, nuggets. Like the bag of chips you're in the mood for, because that can change. And number 1, Buc-ee's beaver nuggets, which is a Texas thing, which you get nothing. You don't know that. You're over here lost in your Wawa crowd. Hey, Zeke Elliott in the end zone, by the way. Look at that.
I mean, why is anyone watching Patriots Steelers?
He's so used to scoring in Pennsylvania, Zeke Elliott is.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to say peanut butter M&Ms, the best kind of M&Ms you can possibly get. Fantastic. I'm going to say, I like a wrap from Wawa. I think that's versatile. I think it can be nice. It's not the best thing they have to offer, but I'm thinking like grab and go specifically. I'm not thinking touchscreen because that seems like more time consumed here. And I'm also going to say, I'm going to directly contradict myself and say the baked potato soup from Wawa. It's my favorite thing. It's so good.
Not a great, I know it's a gas station snack, but not a great traveling snack. I don't think
it's so good. I don't care. I don't even care. It's just so good.
To each their own. We do have some football questions to get to that we'll obviously touch on, but I kind of wanted to get through the fun ones. David Smith is, here we go. I know you love the Dak Prescott. Here we go. I know you're obsessed with it. Okay. Mr. Gowton says, hi, RJ and BLG. Not to brag here, but your dad mentioned my name first. So
yeah, what is that? Come on, Dad.
Brian says IPAs are gross, and so are the Eagles. David Smith comes back and says IPAs rock. Not sure about strawberry milkshake.
Gotta try
Elizabeth, who has gotten many shout outs on the mixtape, asked Brandon, what is on your sweatshirt and your hat? So yeah.
Well, Elizabeth and Holden got me this hat for my birthday, so shout out to them.
Wow.
It's a Dunkin' Donut Etsy hat.
Brandon, before we get to the football questions, last one here from Derek Brown says, BLG sounds like Seth Rogen.
Okay,
have you ever heard this before?
No, it's the first time.
He's 6'5" and sounds exactly like Seth Rogen. Just
well,
so
usually get
everybody
a looks like him. Sounds like him isn't necessarily the same thing.
I think you sound more like him than you look like him, but you definitely look like him as well. So
Okay.
you got that going for you. I guess that makes me. I don't know who that makes me. James Franco. I mean, like in terms of like Seth Rogen's most iconic duo partner. I really don't know. But anyway, let's move on. Football questions. I guess we'll just kind of rapid fire. Cowboys, Eagles, whatever you want to touch on. To go in chronological order, Before God says, where the heck is Avonte Maddox? Aaron Rodgers recovered from a torn Achilles, and half the time is Avonte is taken to recover from a torn pec. Wow, Brandon.
I mean, that's not it's not true.
Yeah, I also think this idea that
play.
This idea that Aaron Rodgers is recovered is what Aaron Rodgers wants you to think, my friend. That's all I'll say. But
yeah, I mean, Nick Sirianni was actually asked about Maddox a couple weeks ago and didn't rule out that he could return, maybe in the playoffs or something. So there's that.
Patrick, who does a great job of spreading the wealth, he comes over to the Blog on the Boys side. I don't know if you knew this, Brandon. He tagged you specifically here for the podcast audience that can't see. We will be podcasting this conversation, by the way, on BGN Radio and the Blog of the Boys podcast network as well. It says Hurts seemed to be holding the ball a lot longer than he was last year, and we know last year was his fastest time to throw, and he did amazing. Do you think that maybe he's pressing because of the pressure of expectations of the fans from last year and the new contract? Final point from Patrick here says,
wow.
I feel like we've had glimpses of 2022 Hurts, but I'm starting to be worried that this might be the type of quarterback he is, that if he isn't able to pull the ball and run, he's going to struggle. Hurts very famously, perhaps infamously, this past week, Brandon had, 3.6, average time to throw, whatever it was. And obviously that's a big part of the conversation for this game is the play of Jalen Hurts and which version of him is going to show up. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I have been harping on this really throughout the season about how, bless you, RJ, who's sneezing, about how Jalen's just holding the ball too long. And that's even going back to training camp, probably even last year. It's just one of my things that I've been annoyed about with him. Like, you can't always just have your receiver open and then throw to him. Sometimes you have to throw your receiver open. And obviously, I think he's done a good job of that throughout, more than not at all. But I think we're not seeing it enough, especially now. And I think there were opportunities. I think it was the 49ers game was a mix of plays that I think were tough in terms of design. I specifically remember a play where Quez Watkins and Devontae Smith were like on both the right side of the formation. They both run like a similar-ish route in the same area, both covered perfectly by the 49ers. No one was over to the left side. A.J. Brown's not even on the field. I'm like, okay, this is bad design right here. But there were other times where Jalen Hurts has the ability to throw into a tight window, and specifically to like, remember how like Carson Wentz got the criticism, he only throws to Zach Ertz? Jalen Hurts has this thing kind of going on maybe like where he doesn't throw to the lesser players. He doesn't like really spread the ball around. And that's okay, like, because you want to give A.J. Brown a lot of targets and Devontae Smith a lot of targets. But sometimes you kind of need to mix in a target to a guy who's like wide open and your offense isn't clicking. And he doesn't really seem to have that comfort level, which like it's frustrating. It can't just be like, well, this guy isn't as good of a player, so he's just not even an option. Like, he needs to be an option because if no one's going to cover him, then what's the point?
I feel like, I'm obviously not keeping my tabs on the Eagles the way that you or the BGN audience is, but the Zacchaeus touchdown against Buffalo, it felt like, is that the first pass he's thrown his way? You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of felt like that's the first non-AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert dude that's been involved in a highlight play of that variety. Again, I'm not saying that there should be like 100 of these, but it was just kind of interesting along the lines of that phenomenon, to your point.
It wasn't what did you say? His first target wasn't his first.
I know that it wasn't, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it just kind of felt like, whoa, somebody else, like a non-AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, obviously Goddard's been hurt, person made a dynamic play.
Ozzy's 2 touchdowns this year have been on like broken plays where he was not involved in the progression as much as he just happened to get open with Hurts extending the play and finding time. And that's the upside. I'm not saying Hurts should never extend the play. Obviously, there are times where it's worth it, but there's risk reward there. And I think Jalen Hurts is doing a little too much. He is the longest average time to throw of his career. No, second longest of his career. It's a high number. Second longest.
Long. I mean, that's not like, that doesn't say a lot to me.
It's second longest in the NFL this year. It's too long. It's too long. It's like 3.3-ish right now. and he was at 2.8 last year. I'm not saying he has to be. It's not like the quicker the better. It's not that simple. It's not like just because you get rid of the ball quickly, you're one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But I think if you're down below at the rate of like where Justin Fields is, well, maybe that's a little too slow. Maybe you need to get the ball out a little faster than that.
Yeah, we talked about on the first mixtape this week the play where he slipped on third down, right? We were talking about with stats. Like sometimes it just feels like, dude, you got to make a decision fast in this. Like I understand waiting for something to materialize, but you that's where like scheming and design comes into play. Like you have to trust, what the play is and was and how it's designed to work.
You're scheming windows sometimes too, right? Like you have a window and it's not going to last forever. So then once it's gone, then now you're just rolling around and like hoping something happens. Like sometimes you have to stay in the flow of the offense.
Patrick offered to kind of close this point, I guess. I've seen on the all 22 Hurts has been missing open receivers, whether it's him scrambling or just not looking their way. Daniel chimes in and says, isn't part of it Brian Johnson calling too many long developing routes against
yes. Yeah, I acknowledge that. I think that is part of the issue. It's not the only part of the issue. I think there are opportunities for him still to make plays like that. But yes, there are some, I think, plays there where the spacing doesn't look great. The options aren't great. So I know this is hard for people to reconcile, but more than one thing can be true. It's not just one person. I think that just happens, right? Because people want it to be as simple as we just flip this one switch and then everything's fixed. But it's not the case. And shout out to, is that Bear?
This is Honey. This is Honey. Yeah. Honey's she's nibbling at the desk underneath.
For the audio audience, RJ is holding his dog up to the camera.
She's still in a little bit of a puppy phase where she wants to chew and eat everything. And I value this desk, so we cannot be doing that, Honey. Good job though, I guess. Thinking it's a threat and trying to neutralize it. Elizabeth says Simba her. I like that. Okay, we're gonna be careful here. We don't want to, get Honey involved in anything, but this is Honey, everyone.
Wow.
Honey the puppy.
She loves it.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was
oh my gosh.
I think something happened outside the house at that exact moment in time.
That was incredible. Oh my gosh. Shout out to Zach Miller in the chat here. Zach M, a loyal mixologist. Remember when I recorded at okay, RJ's leaving the show, so just let me run the show after his dog just had a crazy episode after he held her up to the camera.
All right.
I was saying, remember when I was recording the mixtape this year from a different location and like someone like snuck in the background?
Yeah, and it felt like you didn't know.
Yeah, and I was kidding with you. That's Holden, and you were like,
"Oh, you said Zach in the chat." Oh, yeah, I thought you said Zach Miller. I thought you were acknowledging the former Bears tight end. Didn't he play for the Eagles too, Zach Miller, and the Raiders? I could be wrong.
Raiders.
Anyway, Patrick, by the way, says we need more live pods. If anybody wants more live pods, you know what to do. Tweet at Michael Kist.
It's not up to him. It's up
we
to
want
us.
live pods. We want an in-person podcast. What is Kist's Twitter handle? Michael Kist NFL?
At Michael Kist NFL.
No, I'm sorry. He changed it. It's the Michael Kist.
No. Oh, yeah. He's not. Because he's, an F1 guy too now. So he's just the Michael Kist.
Well, if you follow Kist on TikTok, he's a big book reader. Not that wasn't true before, but he's got some. He's a part of Book Talk, to say the least. Anyway, Daniel
more
says,
comments here.
Love the mixtape, worth being up at 1:30 a.m. my time to catch it live. So thank you very much, Daniel.
Daniel, where are you?
Yeah, you can answer us in the chat. Back to the Jalen Hurts point. We'll obviously talk about Dak Prescott, but we're here on Hurts right now. What's the pressure level on Hurts for this game? Obviously, not as much as literally at stake for the Eagles, what with how they can lose this game and still control their own destiny. But I kind of feel like, Hurts is in a bit of a big spot here. Like, kind of needs to show up and show out and like stop the skid and play really well. Because if the Eagles win, it's not literally over, but it's over from a de facto standpoint, right? Like, go effectively clinch the division, buy yourself the final 4 weeks of the season to figure things out right. Go be a hero one night, and then all is forgiven as you prep for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you steal the shine that Dak Prescott's getting right now, too, right? Everyone's like, oh, Dak's MVP, Dak's MVP. If you go out and you outplay him on national television, I think all that shine kind of goes on you. I know you just lost to the 49ers and Brock Purdy, but, there's kind of an anti-Brock Purdy sentiment out there when it comes to the MVP voting. And I think it's kind of in part because there's a split between, him and Christian McCaffrey. I think some of that voting is getting split on one team. So, yeah, it's a huge spot for Jalen Hurts as the leader of this team. You pay him $51 million a year for a reason. And it's not just to run the ball. Like the sign that was outside the NovaCare complex this week. I mean, it would be helpful if he could actually run it more himself and do it effectively, because it certainly has not been the case this season. And that is very much an issue with the offense and a concern moving forward. I mean, I think he'll be healthier in further seasons, but the problem is if he's not, then you can't just be like, well, the running game doesn't exist anymore in terms of being effective. So, yeah, it's a huge spot for Hurts. It's a huge spot for this team. And like I said, in terms of how you respond to that 49ers loss, to me, is more telling than the actual loss itself. So it's a big opportunity. At the same time, I feel like it's possible that the Eagles are just kind of in a little bit of a rut right now because, I mean, look at the 49ers, who look invincible right now, but had a 3-game losing streak and look bad for a little bit there. I think it's possible that the Eagles are in a little bit of a tough stretch with not just really tough competition, but also back-to-back-to-back matchups where they have at a rest disadvantage. I think it's possible that this team just kind of doesn't quite have it right now, especially in relation to their competition. And I don't think that means the season's doomed. I just think it means that they're in a rough stretch and they can potentially rebound. I think people are going to, this is what I think is going to happen. I think people are going to overreact to the Eagles like losing a couple games here. And then it's going to be, well, they suck, they're done, season's over. And they're going to win a couple games at the end of the season, and that's going to draw people back in. They're going to be like, well, maybe they're not done. And then we'll see what happens in the playoffs. But I just think it's been a bit of a roller coaster.
I mean, I would argue that for a team that has lost 2 total games in the regular season, that's not really much of a roller coaster. It
feels like it here.
I mean,
again, I've said this, like, when you think about 14-3 before a season starts, that sounds amazing. But when you live each week after those losses, each of those, it feels like the sky is falling.
No, I mean, and I've been there. Like Cowboys fans have been there, like following 49ers putting 42 points on you, embarrassment that the whole world saw, that, kind of called into question like who you are. I mean, you remember the way I spoke about the Cowboys. I was like, it's over. Like if you can't beat these guys, like what are you doing all this for? Like This is literally your ceiling. And maybe that's the like looking in the mirror stuff that's happening with Eagles fans this week. Jason is one of the more pessimistic ones in the chat, says we're definitely losing this week and probably next week. You said, by the way, back-to-back games against teams or with rest disadvantages. Are you talking about Seattle or Buffalo?
Well, yes, they played the Bills on coming off Monday night, and the Bills.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's right. Coming off the Chiefs Monday night game. Okay, that's well said. Okay, so that kind of takes me to the Cowboys side. Like the general way I've kind of approached this from a mental standpoint this week, and I've said this in all the places I've done podcasting and conversations this week. Last year going into Christmas Eve. And some of the steam was taken out of that game, obviously, with the Hurts injury. That was the second game they played without Hurts, right? At the time last year? Because it was the Saints, I think, that they played first.
No, I think you have the order wrong. I think it was Cowboys and then Saints.
Really?
Because the Saints was on New Year's Day, I think. And the Cowboys
you're right.
Was on Christmas
You're
Eve.
right. It was during the week. I mean, I'm now remembering. You're right.
You're just realizing this.
Well, if you're
How
always
many
right.
episodes in?
If you're always right, I can't wait to get to what you told Steven Serta and I in our Slack chat in a little bit. But anyway, going into that game, I picked the Cowboys because it was like, this is what the Cowboys always do. They always, always is a general statement, but they always beat the Eagles at home, right? They're going to split this series, whatever. And it felt like that's kind of how they won, right? Like, well, they just always do this. I'm, to be clear, picking the Cowboys here, but it's a different kind of feeling or emotion or analysis. I think that right now, this moment in time, they're the better team. I trust them more. They are playing at a better level. And then you add in all the ancillary things, like they've got a 14-game winning streak at home. They haven't lost to the Eagles at home in forever. They haven't been swept by the Eagles in forever, blah, 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 blah. So it's a different kind. And I think that sometimes teams are in positions with games where it's like a prove it game, right? Like, go prove it. Prove you're a contender. To me, this is a justify game, right? Like, go justify your contending status. Because I think a lot of people have fully acknowledged, okay, you're a contender. You're going to be in the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, go justify that you deserve all that hype. Justify the MVP love that Dak Prescott's finally getting now, the defensive player of the year love that Micah Parsons is finally getting, a little bit of turning of the tide in Mike McCarthy love that he's getting. So go justify. And more than justify, go make the Eagles squirm, right? Like, they might have control towards the division, but like, to your point, it would be an incredibly stressful, December run for the Eagles if they had to be perfect. And obviously, if you force them to be perfect, you wear them out, and maybe they lose in the first round of the playoffs if it's against another team, right? Like, good things happen to you if you win this game. So don't go drop it. Like, go put all of us in that reality is kind of where I'm coming down.
Yeah, I guess you could argue that it matters more to the Cowboys, or there's more value to this game to the Cowboys. Because if they lose this, it's like, I think I said it on the mixtape earlier this week, like it's kind of like the unserious bowl. But I think from a Cowboys standpoint, it's just like you have every advantage in this one. You have the rest. You are coming off of a game or you're coming off a stretch where like you've been playing, good football, whereas opposed to the Eagles have been a little bit shakier and just lost and got crushed. I mean, if the Eagles come out and crush the Cowboys, which I don't think is likely, but if they do, it's like, how are you feeling about that? You got crushed you got swept by the Eagles. You got beat down badly by the 49ers. Like, what's the ceiling for that Cowboys team at that point?
Well, and to your point, I think it's debatable. We don't have to have this debate, but it's debatable that Dallas played better in more categories in the first game against the Eagles, right? Like, and that's been like the calling card. Like, oh man, they were the better team. They just, had more critical mistakes that mounted and ultimately were the reason they lost. If you go and you get blown out, like that argument, all of a sudden falls on deaf ears. Like nobody cares to hear that. It's like, oh well, when you had the chance, to your point, when you were coming off the rest advantage, when you had all the positive vibes. And not even just a rest advantage. And I don't mean to say this and give you oh man, the schedule makers love the Cowboys, but this is their third home game in a row. It's not just that they have a rest. They have not been in a hotel in almost a month. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you've got a lot of home cooking going on. I know that this week had the weird Mike McCarthy appendicitis thing, and all the good thoughts and prayers to Mike and his recovery. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you have all of the quote unquote momentum powering you. You should win this game, and honestly should win it comfortably, although that's a huge kind of thing to say because the Eagles were such a good team.
Well, what do you mean by win it comfortably? What do you think they should win it by?
Well, I mean, they're favored by 3.5, and they haven't played. And I mean, last week was a close game, obviously, in their building, but they won it comfortably at the end. I know it was stressful, but they didn't win on the last second field goal. I mean, I expect them to be in the lead. I'm not saying that's not my prediction, but that's the type of team,
like the whole game you're saying.
Yeah, I believe them to be a team that's capable of getting out to call it what you want, 10-point lead, 14-point lead, whatever, and just kind of keeping pace at that point, because that's what Philly is so good at, is they will not fall behind. They will not put themselves out of the game. Obviously last week is the extreme outlier over the last few years in that sense, and so do not let up. This is the kind of game, and a lot of our guys have said this, but I would want the ball to start the game, and I would want to go score, and I would want to bury them early, and I would not, because the Eagles are not going to let you, again, last week was a weird game, not going to let you get out to a 21-0 lead. You're going to surrender touchdowns. You're going to surrender points to them, but you've got to put some distance between yourself and them, and then you've just got to keep that distance. You cannot let them get within an inch, because at that point it's over.
Can't let them hang around. Clearly, That's been an issue for many a team. 49ers did not let them hang around wisely, and it paid off for them. So I don't disagree. It's weird. It's a weird week, because in theory, this is a really big game. But at the same time, it might not matter for the Eagles in terms of still being able to get the 1 seed and win the division. It might not matter from a standpoint of the 49ers are still far out in front of both of these teams. It kind of feels like a battle for second place in that regard. There's less juice from a Cowboys standpoint because you're coming off a Thursday game. It's like a long layoff. Kind of just, you lose some of that steam after you lost your last win. And from the Eagles' perspective, it's there's not a lot of juice about this team right now after such a bad loss. So my point is there should be more juice for this game than there is.
It's not two teams coming in on 6-7 game winning streaks and one unstoppable force, one immovable object. It's a little bit of cooling that's happening. I agree.
Yeah. By the way, I think we're at a point in the season where maybe let me know if you feel this way too. I think the NFL media coverage has hit a brick wall. You talk about the rookie wall. I feel like I've seen other outlets too even feel like everyone's tired. It's December 7th. Christmas is a couple weeks away. We're in sight of that, but it's also week 14. Everyone is kind of feeling it a little bit.
I mean, to your point, and some of this is the game itself, but the game that's happening in parallel with this live show is everybody's I don't want to watch this. Like you know what I mean? Like everybody's like, oh, like this is horrible. Like whatever. So a couple of comments. Daniel answered your question. It says chilling in Belfast, originally England. The birds are bigger than my hometown soccer team. Is that your second IPA? Brandon, chill out a little bit.
This is a different one. It is
the
lager.
The point stands. Okay, I do want to get to this question. I want to come back to something the Lunar Cowboys said, but Fine Oak thing, kind of along your point, says, do you guys think the regular season is boring for these teams? Meaning we all know they're making the playoffs and postseason is all that matters. I think you and I are kind of responsible for the greatness that these two teams have had in terms of regular season success, because we started the NFC's mixtape in 2021. The Cowboys won 12 games and the Eagles won 10 games that year. And we're a playoff team and obviously a 7 seed. But still, the Cowboys and Eagles have both been playoff teams every year the NFC East mixtape has existed. And they're both obviously on track. They both have different playoff clinching scenarios this week. But, I mean, they're going to be in the playoffs. And so to that point, it's like, okay, this might determine where that game happens if they meet in the playoffs, but like they're both going to be there at the end of the day, which takes away a little bit of the like do or die-ness of this specific game on Sunday night.
Well, in the going into the season, it was like, who are the best teams in the NFC? The 49ers, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. It's been that conversation the whole time. It was like, well, can Detroit sneak in there maybe? But no, they can't.
Well, speaking of cooling off, I
don't think they're not like terrible. They're going to be, obviously, I think they're going to win their division.
There's a clear gap right now between San Francisco and Dallas, Philly. And then there's another little gap between them and Detroit.
Is there anyone else in that Detroit tier? I guess not. They're kind of on their own little thing.
If Geno Smith plays like last week, Seattle has a chance, but they're probably the closest. If Green Bay got hot, maybe Green Bay's in that tier. They're kind of the lurker right now, I think, of all options.
We have some good questions that we need to get to here, including from.
I wanted to get to this point quickly from the Lunar Cowboys. It says Cowboys are winning, just to be clear, and it won't be that close, but the season is not over for either team, no matter the outcome. Which again is the point. Well, I know you agree. We'll get there. Okay, Mr. Gowton. To be clear, Doug, not Brandon. Says it will be a tough game.
Eagles, please.
It will be a tough game for the Eskils to win. I believe there must be something wrong with his A key because he said I believe they can do it with an.
Oh yeah. But then he does and fine.
I don't see.
Why does he have a Y in much?
Maybe he's typing with one hand like that. I think that maybe he's busy with something and he just wanted to be a part of the conversation. Because there's a few typos here, Mr. Gowton. All due respect.
Dad, come on, make me look bad.
Anyway, Daniel offers from Belfast. I think Jalen is going to be on a mission this week. Daniel,
did you see the AJ Brown quote from his locker room?
I did not. And then
his locker stall.
What is the AJ Brown quote?
It was kind of it was interesting. It was like Howard Eskin was asking him, something to the effect that after the 49ers game, AJ was asked about, like, did the Eagles have, like, good enough energy or whatever? And he kind of had, like, a interesting answer, or not, like, super interesting, but he just was, like, he didn't answer it very directly. He didn't just give you a cliche. He kind of had, like, a weird attitude about it. And then he was asked this week about, like, are you going to have an issue getting up for the Cowboys game? And he was like, you'll see. You'll see. So you better back that up. If you're going to be like a we'll see guy, then
I think it's funny that you have no problem going after Darius Slay for the way he kind of hypes himself up, but you don't hold other players to that standard when they talk.
I mean, AJ Brown delivers. What are you talking about?
No, but I mean, if AJ Brown delivers on that point, then that's fair. But who was it last week? Was it Hassan Reddick? I'm asking. That was like there was a lot of boo-hoos or whatever. Who said that last week ahead of the Niners game?
Yeah, I mean, he was asked. I don't think he was talking trash. I think he was.
I'm just saying. I mean, if you're going to come at Darius Slay, with some energy,
I don't think Reddick had the other Eagles
to the same level of accountability.
Like the second snap of the game.
I'm just saying, there were boo-hoos, but on the wrong side for Philly fans on Sunday. Brian, by the way, asks, what do you guys think about Bosa's comments? Stats brought this up to you and I like an hour ago. I think we'd all seen them by then. I'm generalizing here, but Nick Bosa said that the league had figured out. I don't think he used the phrase figured out Jalen Hurts, but he and to be clear, Bosa has an incentive to stoke the flames here. It works out for the Niners. Obviously, if the Cowboys beat the Eagles this week, they're rooting for Dallas the way San Francisco or the Cowboys were San Francisco. What was his exact quote and what are your thoughts on it, Brandon?
I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something to the effect of like the 49ers put out the blueprint. I think that's like a very overrated talking point. Anytime a good team loses is like the blueprint. And surprisingly, they're still a good team a lot of the time.
Also,
and also what's the blueprint?
Yeah, is the blueprint just like kick their ass, like,
have 10 all-pro players and like one of the better play callers, and like what's the blueprint? Like be a really elite team, be the best team in the NFL. Is that the blueprint? Okay, great blueprint. Yeah, just replicate that. It's that simple. So I think that's a little much to me. I always hate it every year when it's like it becomes this big story that one player after a team beats another team on the winning side is like, well, we just knew what they were calling. That probably happens in so many games. Like, it's not like a secret. It's not like every play call is like a mystifying. Oh my gosh, we've never seen that before. A lot of it's about execution, about like blocking well and tackling well. The Eagles didn't do a lot of that, so that's part of it. Yeah, I think it's. Oh, also, one of the very few positives from that game was Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson owned his matchup with Nick Bosa. I saw him pancake Nick Bosa at one point. Nick Bosa in that game had 1 quarterback hit and 0 sacks. And for him, like reigning defensive player of the year, it's not a game for him. So I don't want to hear him talking as if he had some great game.
Football's a team sport, Brandon. By the way, the overall point about like, mystifying play calls, always like that kind of idea will always remind me of the Cam Newton, Clay Matthews play. Where Clay's like, it's that wheel route. It's that, and Cam's like, oh, that's cool. You know what's coming?
Right.
Like, who cares? Like, we're totally fine. Patrick, with a question. This is a good one. How much of an impact is McCarthy having?
Yeah, I want to get your take on this.
So I think this happened after we recorded on Tuesday. I've actually had appendicitis myself. I don't know if you knew that. Well, yeah, when I was 13. And I think my parents are watching right now too. They just don't comment a lot. So mom and dad, sorry.
Well, my parents are better.
Wow. I was not feeling well. And I tweeted about this, and I got a lot of people who had similar experiences. I was not feeling well as a 13-year-old, and they were like, quit complaining. They were like, you're exaggerating. And they took me to the doctor, and they were like, this dude's appendix ruptured. Like, you got to get him to the hospital. So mine ruptured. Most people have like the tiny little scar. I'm sure you're aware, like where they remove it. I have a scar like kind of going down my chest, or like the bottom of my stomach. Because they had to like clean me out. But anyway, that's, I'm fine. But so my experience was a lot more arduous than what Mike McCarthy seemingly has gone through.
Well, what was the recovery like? Like, how was it after you had it? Yeah.
I was like out of school for like a month. Like, it was,
So
intense.
how much McCarthy going to coach the game?
Well, again, it was an intense process that I went through. Like a standard appendectomy is pretty simple. You know what I mean? It's just they remove it, but like most people's don't rupture. Mine did.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I wouldn't say it's like an outpatient surgery. It's not like, I'm not a doctor, but it's not like getting your tonsils removed. That being said, he was at home today. And I don't know if you saw this. Dak had a really cool quote. He said that he gave kudos to the Cowboys coordinators who ran practice, and said that there was kind of this like heightened level of focus to have a great practice, to sort of take that off McCarthy's mind, right? Like, make him feel like, okay, like not to be stressed out about not being there, whatever. For what it's worth, I don't know if you remember this, Dak Prescott called all of the offensive plays as the play caller in the final preseason game of the year for Will Grier. So he has a thorough enough understanding on offense to, I wouldn't say call the entire game, but to survive in any kind of particular scenario.
Okay.
By the way, Elizabeth asked me to show my scar. I'm not going to do that. So just
I said in the chat there, that's a different subscription.
Yeah,
we really should do a Mixtape Patreon, but that's a whole different conversation.
If people want to do that, hit up Michael.
I think it would be a good way to do more live shows, because
that's a great point. By the way, David says you guys have turned it into the NFC beast. We came up with that.
Yeah. But I think he means we're getting away from the division and talking about the conference. But that's what it's all about. It's between the Eagles, 49ers, and Cowboys.
So what are you most afraid of? Let's go down that alley.
In general?
This is Cruz in Coach Carter. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Is that we are more powerful beyond measure. I know you've seen Coach Carter. Don't act like you haven't seen it.
Of course, no. Great movie.
What is your biggest fear with those spiders?
Yeah, I don't like spiders. I gotta be honest. I really don't.
Again, like, you offer these takes like they like, name the person who's like, oh hell yeah, I love spiders.
Some people do like spiders. And I don't get it.
But that's the significant minority. Like, you're acting like you have this unique take of like, guys.
I'm not acting like that. I'm just saying I agree.
Anyway, what is your deepest fear with this game? Like, if this comes to pass, you're like, crap, it's gonna be a long day.
I honestly didn't really feel that bad after the 49ers loss. Obviously, it sucked. I didn't like prefer that outcome, but I didn't feel like devastated. I'm like, yeah, they're in a tough stretch. It happened. I'm curious to see how they respond. It would be disheartening in that regard then if they just come out and lay another egg. At the same time, that would also make me believe that, in my cope standpoint, it would be like, well, they're just like tired. They're totally just beaten down. They're in a rough stretch right now. They can bounce back. They not necessarily will bounce back. But I guess my worst fear is that has to relate to Hurts. I need to see more out of Hurts. If he has another game where it's just like not good enough out of your $51 million player, then that would be disheartening.
So Brian answered Dak. I know you have the chat open, but you have famously said that you're not afraid of Dak Prescott. But Brian said he is afraid of Dak and he is scared to say it. So this is like fearception. Like you're afraid of the fear, I guess, that is lurking.
Do I look afraid?
Well, I think that's a good question, like for me to ask, because I think we both agree this is the best that Dak Prescott has ever played, right? Like, however you want to define that right now, like this is the most potent version of him in the NFL, and that's because there have been incredibly potent versions of him before. So, like, if you have never been afraid of him before and you're not afraid of him now, I don't think you're defining fear in a fair way, because there's more than enough reason to be afraid of him right now for any team, not just.
Well, I also said that last year. To be fair, right? I mean, I didn't say that.
I'm very certain you said that at the beginning of this season. So,
I mean, clip it, find it. In any case,
I don't know if you know this. You moved in slow motion when you said it. It was kind of like a cool effect, like clip it. I think it was a really. But are you afraid of Dak? I don't have a problem saying I'm afraid of the potential of Hurts.
I'm not afraid of him. I think the matchup is obviously.
You're afraid to say it.
Good.
I think Brian's got it.
I'm not afraid of him. It's not scary.
The Lunar Cowboy says if you aren't afraid of how Dak is playing right now, you're definitely
how he's beating like the worst teams in the NFL. Yeah, it's so scary.
Okay. As opposed to the incredible.
How many wins does he have above 500 teams this year?
As opposed to the incredible win that Jalen Hurts had over the Buffalo Bills, who are terrible.
Let's count all 0 of those.
I'm most afraid not of Jalen Hurts, but of AJ Brown. He is and of course this would be the case that he would turn out to be this like phenom after the way I doubted the trade to begin with. But I mean, like, I am terrified of AJ Brown, and like it's a difficult
the level of wrongness you were on that take has to outdo the level of wrongness on any other take that I've had.
The level of wrongness wasn't predictable, though. You know what I mean? Like it was.
Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. He was a fantastic player for the Titans.
It was impossible to predict that he would be this like trend-setting. Like.
How?
I mean,
he was great with the Titans. It was not in a run-heavy offense. He was incredibly run-heavy.
It was not impossible to predict that he would be very good, but it was impossible to predict that he would be, like, to use your word, mystifying, which is what he has been for the most part. Although he had cooled off a little bit. And he held back our same game parlay last week with Steven. He didn't even get in the end zone. So we're a little bit down on AJ Brown around that show.
It's not crazy to think he could have been an elite receiver when they traded for him. He was like top 5 in yards per route run each of his seasons in Tennessee. Like there was like metrics that supported he's an elite player in terms of efficiency who just hasn't had volume opportunities. But
Andrew
whatever.
Says afraid of Jalen deciding to use his legs against us when he hasn't been healthy. So I think Andrew's coming from a Cowboys point of view. What is the likelihood of that happening from your point of view? I mean, because you, so for anyone who doesn't know, we do another show together on Fridays on the SB Nation NFL show feed. And part of that show is we put together a same game parlay around a game that's happening in the NFL that week. And last week we did we did Eagles-Niners, and you took the under on Jalen Hurts' rushing yards. And you talked about how he hadn't hit whatever it was, I forget now, that mark, I think all season, or maybe once all season. You've been talking a lot about how he hasn't been as much of a runner. So for somebody in Andrew's case who is afraid of Jalen being a runner, do you think that that's a rational fear, or is that potentially irrational because it hasn't been the case?
It's hard for me to say it's going to happen just because we haven't seen it a ton recently. There's a little bit more of that against the Chiefs. He had that one crucial run against the Cowboys in that game right after he actually got another shot to the knee right after halftime there. I think it's possible that in a very high stakes game, he busted out a little bit more. We see a little bit more of it just because of the magnitude of this game. But until I do see it, it's kind of like I'm not gonna just believe it.
So then, along those lines, because I think this matters towards contextualizing those kinds of points. This is the biggest Eagles game since when? Because to the overall point, they can lose and control their destiny. So like
that's what I mean.
That inherently, eliminates some magnitude. You know what I'm saying? So like
so maybe not. I mean, it is and it isn't. That's the thing. At the same time, more than one thing can be true. It is really big.
Schrodinger's big game. Schrodinger's magnitude.
In the sense that you can just NFC East is over, done and dusted. This with a win over here. At the same time, again, you might not even need that. So, kind of both sides there.
So you don't have an answer as far as what was this is the biggest game since.
I don't know. I don't really. I mean, I was going to say the first Eagles-Cowboys game, I guess.
Yeah, I guess
but
so.
Not even. I think that was a bigger game though. So,
but because of that win, that has bought them the breathing room that they have in this game. I mean, maybe you could argue last week against San Francisco.
And then before that one, they didn't really have any huge game that they played.
Well, because they've been 10-1, 8-1. What you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's hard to have big games when you have leads on people like that.
They haven't played teams that were super relevant either in the playoff picture. So
I like this from Steve. Says it's a big win and a little loss. That's a good way to put it. But it's not little. I mean, it's the point is valid, but it's
much to gain, little to lose.
Yeah. Okay. What do you want to talk about now, Brandon? I went with the deepest fear thing.
I don't know. Let's get to the comments.
Well, I mean, you have to do some work here too, besides the commenters.
No,
what's the topic you want to talk?
I love the listeners, unlike you, and I actually want them to have a voice, unlike you. So
what? Brandon says, I know it's rivalry week, but I want to say thank you for all the work everyone puts into this. With living 1 hour south of Lambeau, I needed this.
Interesting. Not a Packers fan.
Brian says, I'm most scared of Big Dom.
Wow.
Do you think there will be Big Dom punishment?
I love that
before the week is over.
Stats was he tweeted out oh, see, but Big Dom was he did the mocking SpongeBob voice, so it didn't matter. They sent out a memo. That's oh no, not a memo. Oh my gosh, a memo. My worst fear.
Stats sent me a screenshot of before any of the contact, and I am curious why Big Dom is right there.
Because he's Nick Sirianni's bodyguard, basically, is what he serves the role as.
Is Nick afraid of action during the game? Nick needs a bodyguard during the game?
Yes. I mean, everyone wants to get on Philly for having, rowdy fans. Yes. The answer to that is yes. Or at least Andy Reid always had it too. It's not just Nick specific and Chip. Dom's had this role forever.
Okay. I wanted to get to a certain comment here. The Lunar Cowboy says,
do you understand how a big of a target coaches are for criticism? Yes, they do need to have a bodyguard in Philadelphia.
Another thing is from the Lunar Cowboy, I really do feel like the Cowboys win relatively big, but I don't think the Eagles lose 3 in a row. So I still feel like we get the 5 seed. I don't know what what New York Times is odds would be on the Cowboys winning the division if Dallas does win on Sunday night.
I can look that up for you.
But it would involve the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys, barring Philly losing, to the Giants, in all likelihood have to finish with a better record than Philly. So they would.
Yeah, they're unlike, which is the weird thing that you kind of mentioned on the preview show too, or on the other show earlier this week. The Cowboys will technically be in first place, but not actually due to the tiebreaker.
Well, they will be, but it's just
not to the tiebreaker that matters at the end of the year.
Right. They'll be in first place at the moment, but Philly will have the opportunity to regain it, and Dallas can't impact that, is the point. But again,
and they'll have the tiebreaker potentially, yes.
But if Philly were to lose one of their Giants games, that changes the equation, obviously. But that is obviously incredibly unlikely. If Philly were to lose to Arizona, I mean, that's a common loss, obviously, that they stand to gain, or common game they stand to gain over Dallas because the Cowboys lost to the Cardinals earlier this season. So yeah, I think that's well said.
Yeah, but that wouldn't even come into play. So
no. But I'm saying all tiebreakers that are relative, and that's why Seattle is important. Plus, Seattle after this game is probably the biggest chance that the Eagles do have to lose. Just again, they're not losing to the Giants or the Cardinals. Ed says, I'm most afraid of Cowboys penalties. Do you know where the Cowboys rank, Brandon, in penalties so far this season?
No.
Penalties called against them. Where would you guess?
Well, the refs hate them. The refs are out to get the Cowboys, so they're probably number 1.
They're not number 1.
I don't know.
They are number 2. The Seahawks have had 91 penalties called against them this season. The Cowboys have had 90. Do you know how many penalties the Cowboys have called towards their benefit?
No.
78. Now, do you know which team has benefited the most?
The Eagles.
That is incorrect.
I don't know.
The Denver Broncos have benefited the most with 89.
Yeah, I want to see penalties per snap. I mean, that's more of a kind of irrelevant number.
I mean, but I mean, then you can look this up. But the Eagles, in terms of overall total beneficiary count, are tied for the 3rd most.
I also
So
want to see adjusted for garbage time too.
again, you can look that up if you want. But Ed's comment was, I'm afraid of Cowboys penalties. The Cowboys have been a heavily penalized team this year. The Eagles have not. You can take that to mean whatever you want, whether you think the refs love the Eagles or hate the Cowboys. Like, I don't put stock into that kind of stuff myself, but that is a real thing. I mean, the Cowboys were penalized 9 times last week and they barely won. And that was a big reason why. And you can obviously argue about the legitimacy of some of the subjectiveness of some of those penalties, but some of them are fair. Like some are undeniable. And so, Lane Johnson's going to get away with false starts every single play. We all know that. Ed, by the way, says the Eagles just play clean football.
So that's right, baby. No, not even deserving of penalties.
Give us a question, Brandon. You got to give us one as a group.
What is a Cowboys win mean to you over the Eagles here?
Is that really your question?
Yeah.
I mean,
because you're going to be celebrating it, but because the Eagles beat the Cowboys beat the Eagles, but what is your true, actual, deep down level of we can win the NFC East now, or this is nice, but it doesn't really mean that much?
I mean, the odds improve to win the NFC East, and it is possible.
But are you going to believe it? Are you going to fully believe it?
Some of that, I don't mean to ride the fence. Some of that is contingent upon how the Eagles look, right? If the Cowboys blow them out 42-10 or whatever, then it's I could totally see the Eagles slipping up and up. You know what I mean? If they're withering, you know what I mean? That would be the take. But if it's clearly 2 stout performances, 2 even teams, whatever, and Dallas just happens to win, I think the general takeaway is awesome. This is great. Now the Eagles are certainly going to be uncomfortable for the next few weeks. They're not going to be able to coast and chill. And that's going to be, a more difficult path. Obviously, you want the most difficult path for your rivals if you're a Cowboys fan. And it does keep them alive, not just for the division, but for the 1 seed. And I don't know if you know that the Seahawks play the Niners this week and then the Eagles next week. So we're big Seahawks fans around here for a little while. So it gives you, it gives you something to keep hoping for. It gives you something to keep hoping for. And again, if they win with authority, I will be very impressed by the justification that will have happened. It will, in all likelihood, probably propel Dak even further towards MVP with, a month ago. But, how can you not be excited about all of those things?
I don't disagree for your sake. It's a weird dynamic because of, again, the Eagles' likelihood to get the 1 seed and then the 49ers' inevitability that specifically looms incredibly large over the Cowboys in particular.
I think we should both answer this question. If you want, I'll go first. So, because I know you're afraid of the Cowboys and afraid of Dak, and you just don't like to say that and reckon with that truth. What will be the hardest thing for you to admit if the Cowboys win? And vice versa.
You're going to ask Elizabeth's question about would you rather fight 100 duck-sized Daks or 100 Dak-sized ducks?
Elizabeth, I'm a big fan of you and I've heard a lot of great things, but it's a pretty cliche question at this point in time. A lot of people ask the question.
RJ, very disrespectful. I would think I'd rather fight the Daks because I don't want to fight ducks. I like ducks.
All I'm saying is this question's asked a lot with ducks, with horses, with turtles.
What's your question again?
My question is, what will be the hardest thing for you to admit? If in your case, if the Cowboys win, in my case, if the Eagles win, and it could be something you have to admit about the Eagles on your end or the Cowboys or vice versa.
I don't think I'm ready to say the season is over, even if the Eagles get blown out in this game, just because again, you can get the 1 seed. The season's not, if you can have the 1 seed, I don't care how bad you are, the season is not over. That's an incredible advantage to have. And there's time to figure your issues out. So I can't say that the ceiling's totally going to drop out.
Okay, well, so you've answered something that won't be hard to admit. So what is something that will be hard for you to admit if the Eagles lose this game? Ooh, I like Andrew's answer. Andrew says that the tush push needs to be banned. That's funny.
Jason Kelsey said that he doesn't even care anymore if they ban it I don't really care.
Because he's retiring. It's not his problem. He's good.
That's not why he said it. It's because that even if you take away that element, the Eagles are still going to be really good at it. I'm pretty confident.
I think the hardest thing for me to admit will be twofold if the Cowboys lose. And obviously this is exacerbated if they're blown out themselves, but it will be that we can all acknowledge that the Eagles and Cowboys are a cut below the Niners right now, right? It's impossible to argue against that right now.
It's inarguable.
So it would be really, really hard to believe, let alone argue or debate that the Cowboys are on a level playing field as even the Eagles. So it's you're clearly the third best team in the NFC. Like, you're clearly not better than them. They swept you. You know what I mean? Your home streak was ended. Your streak, against winning against them, or your streak winning against them at home was busted. You've been swept by them for the first time in 12 years. Like,
Right.
you fell apart, and it will feed the narrative of like, you cannot handle the big time teams. You barely beat the team that was barely above 500 last week. Like, that narrative will come back. I won't like that. To me is a dumb narrative, but it will be annoying. And what will also be very difficult to admit is that the Eagles might win the Super Bowl, because despite the fact that they're playing some lackluster football, they are, in this hypothetical, the way I'm answering the question, they would be 11-2. You know what I mean? With full and total control in the division towards the 1 seed, probably playing a crappy, whoever in the divisional round. Like, they would have a fast track ticket almost to the NFC Championship game. I mean, so those things would be the most difficult things for me to admit.
I don't think it's anything difficult to admit. I think it just, it would be increasingly concerning that, if they get blown out by the 49ers and the Cowboys in back-to-back weeks, that's not good. It's not a deal. I don't think that means there definitely is a cap on this team, but it makes you wonder certainly more that if there is, and it worries you a lot. But again, I think a lot could change by the next time those teams play, especially if the Eagles end up getting the 1 seed. Or having home field in the different, if the Eagles and Cowboys play again in Philly, I like that matchup a lot more than in this week's game in Dallas. Eagles getting some key players back. That's, in theory, nice on paper. Zach Cunningham should be back for this game. They really missed him last week. Dallas Goedert will be back. So those are nice additions to have back to the table here. But I don't think this game changes a lot, which I guess goes back to what I said. I think the Cowboys have more to lose here. Is that fair to say?
I mean, again, I think it depends how you look at that, because, either team, both teams are going to be in the playoffs, right? So, like, neither team is like losing, right? Like, your season isn't over if you lose this game. It's just, you have to reckon with some realities. You have to have those hard admissions. And so, on one hand, I mean, if the Eagles get blown out, I think that might be the harder admission. Like, okay, maybe we are frauds. Like, you know what I mean? Maybe we were just barely holding on and we've lost touch or whatever. Versus
I don't
if
think
Dallas
that means that, though. I think it's a fair question to ask. 100%, it has to be raised, but I don't necessarily think it means that. I think it's possible. Again, I just brought up the example of the 49ers. They had a tough stretch. They're fine now.
That's true, but I think, and I've heard you say this, and I don't say this in like a mocking way or like whatever way, but I mean, like, people have been saying like, oh, the Eagles are winning all these games, and like they haven't even played their best football yet. Like, how do we know the best football is like yet to come? You know what I mean? Like, the best,
I've definitely question
like,
that.
I know you have, but like, I think that would be a hard thing to deal with for Eagles fans as a general group, right? Like, okay, like, I think that would be the reality of like, okay, the best football is not yet to come. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just who they are, and they're fading while other teams are surging, et cetera, X, Y, and Z, to follow all that stuff. That would, I think, be the scariest reality to face if you're an Eagles fan. Again, assuming they lose this game.
Yeah, and that's going to come up, and that's definitely possible. But I keep going back to the point of, because there's so much time still between now and the first playoff game, especially if you do have the bye, that the dynamic can change. Do I think it's unlikely? Yes, absolutely. I think it's unlikely, but I can't rule it out, because that's a big amount of time, and it's also a big advantage to have.
I want to get to some of these comments really quickly. Some of these are non-football related. Zach says, who plays BLG and RJ in the NFC East Mixtape movie? Seth Rogen, clearly for you.
Do you think anyone tells Seth Rogen that he looks like me?
Yeah, I'm sure he's been told once or twice.
There's like this Eagles podcast guy.
Does he know Bradley Cooper? Has he done a movie with Bradley Cooper?
I feel like probably.
By the way, Bradley Cooper saying he would rather the Eagles win the Super Bowl than win an Academy Award is the biggest lie that anybody has ever told. So,
I don't think it's a lie.
I think it's...
Who cares? What's an Oscar worth?
Steve says, I want to hear BLG. I think you meant answer the Dak question after a couple of more IPAs. So that'll be funny. Andrew says, when are we going to get a Madden 24 matchup of RJ versus BLG? You recently got a PS5, so you could get Madden, and we could do that.
I haven't played Madden like, I don't know, 8 years, 7. It's been a long time.
Kyle says, I think the Eagles have way more to lose because of that loss to the Niners. I think that is somewhat fair, because the Eagles have one strike against them in terms of like recent memory, right? Like, so like carrying 2 strikes would be, a lot more
it would suck.
harrowing.
But I don't think. Yes, I agree. It'd be very concerning.
David had a great answer, by the way. Hardest thing to admit that a December Eagles-Dallas game doesn't mean that much. That's a tough reality.
That's a good one. That's a good point by David.
Eric says,
for the
Brandon,
second year in a
who would you
row,
rather
because the
Eric,
Cowboys won last year, it didn't matter.
Eric says, Brandon, who would you rather win MVP, Brock Purdy or Dak Prescott?
Brock Purdy.
Brian, by the way, says, behind on listening. BLG surgeries have vastly changed and are much less invasive than they were 30 years ago. Brian, I don't know if you know how old I am, but I was not 13 30 years ago. So thank you, though. Yeah, that's fine.
Brandon says, I don't see Seth Rogen comp.
Oh, it said, I don't see the Seth Rogen comp. Brandon says, I feel like BLG sounds like Tanner from Project Fear / Destination.
I don't know what that is. I had to look that up.
I don't either. So I wanted to get to your dad's comment. Mr. Gowton said BLG and RJ. Look at that. He put BLG first. Are you planning a bet for this game? Like loser wears the other team's logo, etc.?
No, because I'm taking the Cowboys to win. So that doesn't make any.
Okay, well, this is what I wanted to save, and I almost forgot about it. So thank you for bringing it back up. For the other show that Brandon and I do, we all have a lock of the week. That's based on point spreads for what it's worth. And Brandon messaged Steven Serta and I. You can all listen to that show on Friday. We'll record it tomorrow morning. Brandon messaged us that his lock of the week is the Dallas Cowboys as 3.5-point favorites. My contention is that Brandon is down so badly with regards to the Eagles that he is trying the reverse jinx against them or for them, I guess, against the Cowboys. What is your rationale, not only in picking the Cowboys, Brandon, but in locking them up?
I had the Eagles losing this game in my win-loss prediction when the schedule came out. I've never changed that because they haven't won there since 2017. They haven't swept the Cowboys since 2011. Do I think this Eagles team right now is going to be the team that sweeps the Cowboys? Like, does anyone buy that? Does anyone think that's a likelihood?
No, but no. Everyone sees through this. Brian has the great comment. Says it's
but also
like
that's not that big of a spread to cover. So it's a really actually I think if you think the Cowboys are going to win this game, why would you not take that spread?
I mean, 3.5's a lot. The Lunar Cowboy notes that you are applying your emotional hedge, which you are pretty famous for at this point in time. David agrees with me that it sounds like a reverse jinx. 3.5 is a big, again, of all the games in the NFL this week, that's your lock. I mean, again, it makes sense to pick them to cover, but to lock.
Cowboys won 14 straight at home.
They haven't covered. They didn't cover last week.
Last week that was a 10, 9.5, 9 point spread. That's a big number. This is 3.5.
I know you love that bit. You must think that the Cowboys are a better team than the Eagles right now. Like if you're willing to lay 3.5 points down, you must think they are, and you must believe.
I don't think they're a better team. I think they're in a better spot in this given week because of everything I listed in terms of rest advantage and whatnot.
Brian, that's you're locking up your favorite team. That's true. You love the Cowboys more than a lot of other people.
What's RJ's? You who are locking this also have a worse lock.
No, I haven't. I said specifically I wanted to know if I could lock them up. That was my question because we've never had us like share a lock. Not you and I, but anyone. So I wanted to know if I was allowed to. I haven't come to terms on my lock. I have all the games to choose from if I want to.
Well, that's also part of why I said it first because I didn't want you to get a chance at it first.
Again, the emotion involved in here is
game theory. I want to make sure I have a better pick than you do.
So you don't want to bet on the Eagles? Some kind of fun bet even just for content's sake. You don't want to do it.
No, I mean, I don't think they're going to win. So what's the point of that?
Content. That's what the point would be to have to live out the bet.
I don't believe in it. I can't. It's just no. What would it be? What do you want to do? I can't think of anything.
I loved the bet that you and Stats did a few years back where you had to sing that San Francisco song. So I think that should be, and if it's not going to be a Cowboy song, we should have listeners pick a very Dallas based song that Brandon has to sing the chorus of on next week's mixtape and vice versa. It can't be Fly Eagles Fly, but like a Philly based song and that I will sing the chorus on the mixtape.
I don't know.
You're down bad.
And if the Eagles cover, then that would nullify the bet in theory. Like we said that last time too.
A lot of people are advising me to take the Eagles and reverse your reverse jinx.
That'd be funny. You should. Hey, yeah. Do it.
But then again, if I'm betting on the Eagles, then I would have to sing a Dallas song and vice versa. So like this would be very strange. You have ruined it.
Yeah.
Your down badness with the Eagles has ruined potential for content, just so we're clear.
I don't think it's down badness. I just think they're in a tough stretch, and I think they're going to bounce back from where they're at right now. But I think, look, this is literally, according to like ESPN or at one point, whatever metric it was, like this is like one of the, no, not even one of them. It's like the sixth game, like the hardest 6-game stretch a team has ever had. This is like unprecedented in terms of what the Eagles are doing.
The poor
Adding
Eagles.
on top that they have these rest disadvantages. I think it's possible that this team is just like tired right now. They're just physically and mentally tired. I think they're in a rut right now. I think that's very possible. That doesn't mean they can't get out of the rut, but it does mean they're in the rut right now.
Okay, let's live in your extrapolation of the events. What does the bounce back look like for the Eagles? So they, in your world, they fall to 10-3. I presume you have them beating Seattle next week. Do they win out? Like, is that what they finish 14-3?
I mean, yeah, maybe, I don't know if they win out because, who knows about week 18, what situations transpire.
Okay, well, they win out to the point of clinching,
right?
Is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I think it could look something like that. It's like, oh, wow, they lost to the 49ers and Seahawks, or 49ers and Cowboys back to back. They're terrible, worthless. Everyone kind of tunes out. And then it's like, well, they're probably going to lose to the Seahawks too. And then they go into Seattle and they win. It's like, oh, okay, maybe this team, maybe they're not done, but the Seahawks aren't even that good. Like Eagles fans are saying, it's like, it's just the Seahawks. Geno stinks, blah, 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 whatever. I've said that. But then they have a big win, their first style points win over the year over the Giants.
It's like a 40-0, 38-10 kind of
big blowout game in Philly on Christmas Day. Everyone's feeling good. It's like, oh, it's Christmas. The Eagles won. Everyone's happy, blah, blah, blah. But it's just the Giants. Who cares? Then they beat Jonathan Gannon, and people are happy about that in week 17, whatever. And then maybe they clinch at that point. Maybe they don't, depending on what happens week 18. And then they go into the playoffs being like, the conversation will be, well, did this Eagles team truly turn the corner, or did they just beat up on bad teams? That's going to be the story going into the playoffs.
I have to say, I've enjoyed this week, and it's not even Friday yet, because it feels like Eagles fans are having to experience what life has been like for Cowboys fans as far as the national media for the last, 18 months. Like the David Carr thing was ridiculous, but like those things were said about Dak left and right, like those ridiculous.
Well, in part because he got hurt too, yeah. And Cooper Rush went what 4-1.
That was he went 4-1. So again, it's just kind of funny. Like it's kind of, and even like the way these teams are kind of foils of one another. Like, and you had talked about, and you have mentioned this last year, defending the Eagles blowing out all these bad teams, right? Like, hey, you can only play who's on your schedule. And so like, if that was like what generic Eagles fans said of all of last year, it rendered you like not you specifically again, but like rendered you powerless to like poke holes in the Cowboys, because that was what you hoisted up about the Eagles last year. Again, it's like a really funny dichotomy that these teams are experiencing. By the way, you said they're tired. The Lunar Cowboys said we are all tired of the Kobe.
I don't know.
Fine Oak Thing says RJ sings "Dancing on My Own." I have no problem singing the song that represents the team who lost the World Series of the Houston Astros.
Is this an Eagles comment, or is this a Philly comment, or is this like a troll Astros or Rangers
I really don't know. So Johnny Boy said the toughest stretch matched by a run of luck.
So, I don't know what that means.
People have accused the Eagles of being very lucky this year. What is the Eagles? I'm asking. Okay. What is the Eagles' point differential?
I don't know, off the top of my head.
I mean, I think that's
obviously worse after the Niners game, but they also haven't played. Let's be real. The Eagles haven't played like 3 of their easiest games this year yet. They haven't. That's a fact. That's extremely relevant to the point differential.
Well, I know, but to that point, I mean, the Cowboys have boosted theirs against teams that the Eagles did play, like the Rams or the Patriots. I mean,
of course,
or the Jets. I mean,
the Rams also lost their quarterback throughout. That's relevant. That's certainly a relevant factor.
Okay, well, the Jets quarterback was Zach Wilson. I mean, that's relevant too. So,
yeah.
What quarterback is better that the Eagles lost to, Zach Wilson or Brock Purdy?
I mean, Brock Purdy.
I know.
I don't understand the angle to this question.
Closing thoughts. The floor is yours,
Brandon. Eagles lose. I'm going to say score. I forget what the over-under is, so I'm not really basing this off of that. I'm going to say, off the top of my head, 33-26.
33-26 is your prediction. The over-under is 51.5. So you are covering the over quite comfortably.
Yeah. I feel good
I
about
have
the over in this game.
I have said that I think the Cowboys, quote unquote, win comfortably, but it's like a late, touchdown that makes it a 2-possession game. Like maybe the Cowboys win something like I was going to say 37-27, but it's like 30-27, and Dallas punches it in with like 14 seconds left or something. You know what I mean? Something like that. Like it's closer than the box score or the final score would kind of have you realize. And I also obviously I want this, but I also don't want everything to be sewn up, 2 weeks before Christmas. That would be boring. So yeah, I want the
disagree.
chaos. Johnny Boy says, Brian says nice score because he and Johnny Boy both said 35-28 boys.
Yeah, that is funny.
Said 34-24 boys.
That's funny.
For anyone who's unfamiliar with the mixtape, first of all, shame on you. But something we do every week is we all add a song to an ever-growing NFC East mixtape playlist. Our incredible producer, Rachel Prevet, chose Wanna Be Startin' Something by Michael Jackson. By the way, earlier this week, Cavante Turpin on a podcast with the Dallas Cowboys official channel, he said that Brandon Cooks is always singing the same Michael Jackson song. He didn't say which one, but if it's Wanna Be Startin' Something, good job, Rachel. So that is her song choice.
I think that's our first repeat artist on the playlist.
No, I went Taylor Swift twice because, duh.
Second, maybe. Season. Unless it's Drake. Might have been Drake, too.
Brandon, what is your song choice and why?
Last time for the Eagles-Cowboys game in Week 9, I picked kind of like a pump-up song a little bit, if you will. I'm going to stick with that. It's a little bit of a different one, but I think it still counts. It is an instrumental-only song. It is by the XX, and it's called Intro. You probably know it if you've heard it, but you might not recognize it if I just say the name. But if you listen to the song, you've heard the song before.
What is this called?
It's called Intro by the XX.
Intro by the XX.
Yeah.
And you're confident that people have heard of this song?
100%. Look at the chat. Yeah, look at the chat. Look at the chat. People in the chat
okay,
love this song.
Elizabeth having your back doesn't really count. I mean, not a slide against Elizabeth, but she has your back on everything.
Zach also has my back.
I'm gonna go with a song that I can I hate when people be like, "Oh, I knew that band before they were big." You know what I mean? Because I'm not that person. I'm not musically inclined. But I had a friend in high school who told me about this band. And I was like, oh, and again, I'm not a big music head or whatever, but I was like, this is a great band. I like some of their songs. I get down to this. The band is Block Party, and a sitcom that was really great before it sucked was How I Met Your Mother. We don't have to talk about obviously how that ended. But the season 1 finale featured, I feel like I'm pretty safe spoiling this at this point in time, granted that it's been 15, 16, 17 years or whatever it's been. Ted running in the rain to go get Robin with the blue French horn while This Modern Love by Block Party played.
There are some really good music choices in How I Met Your Mother, including Where Soul Meets Body by Death Cab. That was a great usage in the series. Yeah,
and I mean, Kristen Milioti, who played the mother, a musically talented person. So, the NFC East mixtape is a story of modern love in a lot of ways. I mean, the Cowboys and Eagles, there's a lot of modern love there. This modern love.
All right. Everyone is saying goodnight in the chat. Time to wrap it up.
Also, did Elizabeth say Slay, BLG? Because your favorite player is Darius Slay.
All right. On that note, it's time to end the show.
As we leave, Brandon is going to tell us something that he promises to eat before we record TGI football on Friday. Go.
TGI football on Friday? It's tomorrow morning. Nothing, probably. A coffee.
You're not going to eat anything in the next 14 hours?
I don't think I'm going to eat necessarily before the show.
It could be anything. We'll take snacks or candies or treats.
This is my favorite brand of cheese stick. I love a cheese stick. Frigo cheese stick. It's the best.